Okay, we're back, and the surround and the gasket have been glued on, and the glue is dry. So now what we're going to do is we're going to remove our shim. We're going to check for any kind of rubbing. And I'm going to show you a little trick actually on how to verify that the coil is centered evenly in the gap. Then what we're going to do is we're going to trim back our lead out wires. We're going to solder on our tinsel leads, run those through. We're going to solder them onto the input posts, and then we're going to install the dust cap, and the speaker will be done. So let's start by removing our shim carefully. Pull it straight up, like that. Or not. It's fine. And then we're going to check to make sure there's no rubbing. So we're going to press evenly. I usually use these two fingers so I can get a good space, depending on the size of the voice coil. If it's a smaller voice coil, you can just take your fingers and go like this. But in this case, it's 4 inches. So we're going to press evenly and listen for any kind of rubbing. And it's absolutely quiet. Now what we do is, since it's a circle, it's a cylinder, it's a cylinder, I guess you could say. No matter where we press, it's going to cock it on some angle or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to press, like, imagine a north, south, west, and the east. We're going to press in each one of those one at a time, and we should get no rubbing in any direction. If one of them rubs and the other side doesn't, that means the voice coil is not centered in the magnet, it's off to the side. So the first one we'll press here. It won't hurt the speaker, don't be afraid. Nothing, 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 and finally nothing. So that means the voice coil is perfectly centered in the gap, which is what you want. If you did press on this and you got a little bit of rub this way and nothing that way and nothing that way and that way, you can still use the speaker, but it's not exactly centered where it should be. So this will be okay. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to trim back our lead out wires. It's these two things right here. So we know our tinsel leads are going to come in right here and here. And if you look at this, you'll notice that the tinsel leads actually wind up right about in the center of these two things. Right here and right here. So you want to have it even like you see it here. And what we're going to do is we're going to bend these slightly as we come up and we run a tinsel lead out. You'll see that in a second. So with a close shot, you can watch. We're going to take this, I'm going to pull it out a little bit. We don't need to have it come all the way up. We're going to pull it up down here. We'll stay right about there. And use the other cutters that are sharper. Where'd they go? Where'd they go? Where are the other cutters? They're there. Alright, so there you go. A little disorganized here. I'm going to trim this back right there. That'll get thrown away. And the same thing on the other side. We'll pull this out. And trim it right about there. So now we have just our 2 lead out wires. The next step is we're going to have our soldering iron, and we're going to tin these. And I'll show you how to do that. All I do is take some 60-40 rosin quartz solder. Do not use acid core. It'll damage the wire. Make sure your iron is at a normal temperature. 31 Celsius is what I have mine set at. And we begin. So it's pretty straightforward. Take your solder, heat up the metal just like you were soldering anything else, and tin it, and it should look just like that when you're all done. It won't damage the cone, just don't keep it on there for too long. Same thing on the other side. So you want it to have a nice wet appearance and flow evenly. You don't want it to look like gray or hazy or anything like that. You want it to be nice and shiny, the way you see these. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a flathead screwdriver, a standard flathead screwdriver. I'm just going to gently push down right on the corner where it comes out of the coil, and tuck it down in there, like that, and that. Now we're going to take our tinsel lead, which is this right here. This is one long continuous piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this in half off camera. We have 2 drivers to do. So I'm going to cut this in half, just fold it over on itself, and then take your cutters and just cut that once, like that. Put one aside for the other driver. One of the pieces you just cut, same thing, fold it over end to end, and then go to the middle, like this, and just cut it. And this is going to be our 2 tinsel leads for this driver. And the same thing is going to happen with the other one. Okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to tin these I'm going to do these on the table next to the driver here. So we'll go over here, we'll get our solder again, and our iron, and just hold it up in the air a little bit and just tin the edge of this. You don't want to go too far down because there's fabric woven in here, and if you saturate it with solder and rosin, it won't be flexible. So just the very tip of it, just like this. Maybe like a 1/8 of an inch, quarter at the absolute most. That's that one. I'll grab the other one, and we'll do the same thing. Maybe twist it a little bit. And again, when you solder, never apply the solder to the iron. You transfer the heat of the iron through the component you're soldering. So I'll put this on one side and just take the solder and let the wire actually wick it up. Just like that. This way you know the solder is fully going into the wire or whatever you're soldering. A little extra on there, we'll take that off. Okay, so that's that. Those are ready to go. So now we're going to go back to the cone. You can get a good look at this up close. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed this through. You can see that. I'm going to go underneath the cone and grab it and just pull it like that. And then the same thing with the other side. The end that's tinned is right there. So we're going to stick that through here. These are the holes you made earlier. And get this through. There we go. Reach underneath. Grab it. Okay, now we're going to take this and we're going to go right to where our lead out wire is. And the same thing on this side. Now we're going to take our iron again, and now we have extra solder on the lead out wire, so that'll saturate this, and then the thing is already tinned, so it should stick right up. Give it a second to dry, and the same thing on this side. Now this one here needs a little bit more tinning, so let me get the solder again. And it's okay if you do it on the cone, it won't hurt it. Just don't burn the cone. Okay, and now I'm going to grab my screwdriver again, and we'll use that to hold that in place. We'll touch this side up as well. This side's a little lean. There we go. Alright, so that's it for the soldering for right now. This side looks... Yeah, it might not look that good on camera. I'm trying to look at it up close. It's actually a solid, tight connection. There's no issues there. Okay, so now our tinsel leads are run through. So now I have equal length in the bottom. The next step is dust cap. So we're going to take our dust cap. This is a new dust cap, paper. The original ones that were on here were aluminum for high frequency extension, but in the case of what this driver is going to be used for, it's not going to be necessary. So what we do is we lay it on top of there. There's two ways you can do this. You can just lay it on there and look at it, and you want to make sure that the gap between the edge of this dust cap and the first rib on the cone is equal all the way around. If you need to move it, you might have a hard time moving it in some cases. So I just tap the cone like this, and what will happen is it'll generally always rest in this most lowest point, and it'll kind of center itself. Other times it won't. So in this case, I'm going to do it by hand. I'm looking at it, and from my perspective, looking straight onto it, it's centered in the gap, or on the cone. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my finger, I'm going to hold down the cone, I'm going to turn it sideways so you can see it better. I'm going to hold down the dust cap, and I'm going to take just a screwdriver, whatever you want, something very light, and just make a tiny little mark right where the leading wire comes in. Just a tiny little mark, just so you can see it. Nothing permanent. Like that, and that. And now when I pull it off, you can see there's two very faint little marks on here. One there and one there. That's going to be for our leading wires. The reason I do that is so that I can just do a small little notch in there. You could just take it and drop it on top of there and put the glue on there, and it would be just as well. But it'll be a little bit higher on this side. If you look, you can see the gap. We want that to lay as flat as possible. So if you get a close look at this, you'll see the gap right there where the two wires come out. And then what will happen is when you put the glue in, it'll creep underneath. You might have a gap. But if you look over here, you'll see it's where it should be. So I kind of like things to be as good as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cap off, and if you look, you can see the two marks I made right there and right there. So I'm going to take my cutters, and I'm just going to make a tiniest little notch right there, maybe like a 1/16 of an inch long, and another one right here, like that. Pull out that little piece, little triangle. So in the end, you'll have two little notches like that. And what happens with those is when we lay this back down on top of here, if you look closely, you'll see that now the dust cap is laying flat on the cone where those notches are. And if you look all the way around, it's consistent. That's what we want. Okay? So now we're going to just move this a little bit that way. Okay, and now we're going to apply our glue on top of that to hold the dust cap in place. When you do this, you're going to have to hold it in place with something. You could use pretty much whatever you want. A cup. So I've seen people use a nut, like a big giant nut. I'm using a can of regular deoxit, which we use for cleaning controls here at Custom Audio. And I'm going to drop this on top of there. It's going to make the cone sag a little bit, and that's okay. It's going to set it on top of there, make sure it's centered. And what this will do is apply even pressure and hold the dust cap down onto the cone. The next step is going to be adding our black glue, which is both cosmetic and has adhesive properties. So this stuff is kind of tricky, and this is the part that's really, in my opinion, the most important part of a recone, because you want to make sure it looks right. If this isn't on there properly, it'll look terrible. In fact, we just did a pair of drivers earlier today that somebody had taken in to have professionally reconed, and it looked like somebody applied it with caulking gun or something. It was just all up the cone and just spatters everywhere. It looked awful. This is really where I kind of get nervous because I want it to be absolutely perfect. So let me get this ready, and I'll do my best. Alright, I'm shaking this a little bit to get it all towards the front so we don't have any air pockets, which I'm sure we're going to have. Start at wherever you want, wherever you're comfortable with. I'm going to start over here next to the tinsel lead, and I'm going to spin the driver as I do it. And then, well, I guess just take a look and you'll see. Put a nice even bead. Now as this dries, it shrinks and it'll sink in, so it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, even though I like it to be. And you can see it's already a little uneven. This is really thick. It'll sink and it'll kind of fall into where it needs to go. So it's not too critical that it's absolutely perfectly smooth, but you want to get it as good as you can. And we're almost there. Okay, so that's the bead. Doesn't look the best, but it will do the job. Let's see if I can add a little bit over here. Something is up with this. It's kind of dry, it seems. Normally it flows a lot better than this. Okay, so now we're going to go over here and jump the gap right where the two tinsel leads go through. So we're going to just put a little bead. Yeah, this is definitely, something's wrong with this glue. There's like chunks of hardened stuff coming out of here. Well, I apologize if this doesn't look as good as it should. Something is going out with this glue. Alright, right there. Put another piece right there. Now we're going to dress the leads, which basically seals them to the cone and protects them. So turn this way so you can see how we do this. Basically, it's same as you just did, except you go up the side to the hole and back down the other side, like that. Up to the top, and then back down the other side. Something like that. This looks awful. I apologize. I'm going to add a little bit more over here in this. In fact, I'm going to go all the way around one more time and just lay a heavier bead on there. Now it's actually flowing properly. I think I had it warming up just so it would be thinner, but I think it kind of backfired on me and it made it congeal. So I guess don't put it on top of the heater to get thinner, because it has the opposite effect. We're almost done. Okay. Yeah, our cameraman suggested putting it on top of the radiator to warm it up. I'm guessing that was probably not a good idea. I'm joking. Alright, so when this dries, it's actually going to shrink, so it's not going to look as bulbous. We're going to take this off for just a moment so we can solder up the tinsel leads. Let that go. Put a little drop here. So that's that. I don't know what's going on with this. Alright, so now underneath here, we're going to solder our tinsel leads up really quick. What I'm going to do is I'll just do it over here really quick and I'll show you afterwards because I don't think the camera's going to catch it. So give me 1 second and let me get in here and do this. I need a soldering iron again. And this part here is kind of important because you want to make sure that there's enough slack on here so that when this driver is playing, it's not ripping the wires out of the cone. So it's important to make sure you leave enough slack, but not too much to where it will slap against the cone or the basket. So we'll move the first one through. Okay. And when this is all said and done, we'll actually be able to put a signal through this to verify it's working properly. And it'll be ready for use within a few hours of drying. I would say it's probably best to let it sit overnight just to make sure it's completely cured, all the epoxy and everything. But you could actually test it without fear of damaging it pretty quickly. And these are not going in. Fuck. Okay, let me get some extra solder. Same thing we did earlier. Unfortunately, I wish I could show you this, but the camera doesn't allow us to get this down here. We're going to tin the ends of these leads like we did originally. Now the other one. And then we solder them to our all right. One and the other one. Kind of a tight area to get in there. Alright, and that's it. So this is the underside now. If you look underneath here, you'll see the tinsel leads right here and right here, soldered to the post from the cone. There's a lot of slack on here. This is going to be used for low frequencies, so you want to make sure there's enough room for them to move. So when the cone's moving up and down, you'll see how they work. They kind of vibrate, or I should say flex, to allow the electrical connection to stay steady, but they don't break. They're meant to move continuously. So that's pretty much it. Now we'll go back and we'll stick this back in our thing, and we'll do just a quick test. This is not fully dry, but it's dry enough where we can actually put a signal through it. So we'll take our tone generator, and all right. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to run a tone through here and make sure that the driver is working properly. So right now there's music playing through it, as you can hear. So we're going to get rid of that. And this here is 10 Hertz. And what we'll do is we'll sweep it up. There's 10. And what we're doing here is we're listening for any kind of buzzing or noise or rattling or anything down in the cone. And everything's fine. So basically this driver is now done. We're going to put this this can back on here and let the glue dry. It's already starting to sink, so in the end it'll become concave. It'll no longer be round, it'll be concave, so it'll look a lot nicer than it does right now. Though I'm not really happy with the way it looks. All the same, the driver is now complete. This driver can be installed tomorrow and used immediately. It's all done. That's it.